We'd like to welcome everybody out to the Northeastern Region Regional Advisory Council meeting starting at 6 o'clock on May 21st. We'll go ahead and do the introductions. We'll just start down with Adam and start introductions with the RAC.
Adam Nielsen, Watchable Wildlife.
Jordan McMahon, Bureau of Land Management.
Here's a lean sportsman filling in as a wildlife chair.
Tanya Keeper Selby filling in for Miles Hamburg as the RAC DWR representative.
Tasha Haddon, U.S. Forest Service representative.
Richard Bueller, public at large.
And we also have Bob Christensen in person here at the wildlife at the meeting, and then Gary Nelson and Kent Johnson on as well online. We'll excuse Jake, Nathan, Eric, and Dwayne. Looks like Will is calling as well. We don't really have a quorum yet, so we really can't vote on anything. So approval of minutes, we'll just go ahead and move on to the wildlife board. Well, I guess I better read this opening statement. So welcome to the Northeastern Region Advisory Council meeting. Meeting is held in person at the Vernal, Utah DWR office, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is complex and sometimes it is emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. It is why we're here today, and that's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with our own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, or laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, the RAC chair will remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, the applicable individual or individuals will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. And if you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. Also, if you want to make a comment, a public comment, the yellow cards are out the hallway. Let's do that on there and then bring them up here for that. I'll go ahead and move on to the Wildlife Board update. The first one was the made a motion to look to reclassifying the Oak Creek unit to a premium unit during the mid-plan review. That passed unanimously. The next motion was approve the deer permit recommendations as presented by the division, and that one passed unanimously. Then next was the once in a lifetime permit recommendations. Move that they accept the once in a lifetime permit recommendations as presented by the division with the addition of the archery bison permit in the bookless Little Creek and bookless Bitter Creek archery hunts. And that was passed 4-2. Then the next one was the bull elk permit recommendations, accept the bull elk permit recommendations of 2026 by division, and that one passed unanimously. The next was the pronghorn permit recommendations, and that one was to accept as presented, and that one passed unanimously. Then the next motion was to reduce the antlerless moose permits on the Wasatch Mountain Salt Lake Timpanogos unit to 2 permits and the Morgan Ridge South unit to 8. And then it was amended to reduce the Morgan unit from 8 to 5, allowing 3 any legal weapon and 2 archery. And that one passed 5-1. The next motion was to approve the remainder of the antlerless permit recommendation for 2026. They amended that to increase antler sale permits on the Monroe unit from 40 to 60. And that passed unanimously. The next one was to allow the non-resident to apply for one antlerless moose permit on the Morgan South Ridge. That passed unanimously. The next one was to accept the 2026 CWMU antlerless permit recommendations as presented by the division, with the exception Deseret antlerless moose is reduced to one public and one private. That one passed 4 in favor and 2 with 2 recusals. The next one was to move to accept the aquatic rule amendments from R657-3C and R657-59 as presented, and that passed unanimously. So we'll next move on to the regional update. Do we have that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on to the regional update.
All right, for the wildlife section, it looks like our wildlife section reported that sage grouse numbers are remaining stable and that the light winter allowed for higher rates of deer survival, with the current statewide average at the 0.93 for adults, 0.71 for fawns. The aquatic section, it's a pretty busy time of year with the low reservoir levels throughout the region. This year with the Old Fort ponds, it's one of our WMAs and community fisheries here in the Northeastern region, and one of the ponds is completely dry, and the other one is looking pretty slim, as you can see on the top picture on the right. Pelican Lake 78%, Steinecker 43, Red Lake 41, Mount Warren 41, Calder 60, Krause 6%. That one has an emergency change on it as of until the end of December. Upper Stillwater at 45% and Moon Lake at 67%. There are a few locations that do have higher water levels than the others. Starvation being at 93, Big Sandwash at 90, Kern Creek at 97, Ruff at 98, Cottonwood at 99, and Round Straw at 100%. The Flaming Gorge releases, it's been a pretty popular topic. The DWR is planning to release between 660,000 to 1 million acre feet of water from the reservoir. The releases are being conducted to support the water levels of Lake Powell, and the full release of water will occur over the year with anticipation happening up until April 2027. The anticipated impacts, depending on the total amount, will likely impact boat ramps in Wyoming. Amblejaw is the most likely ramp to become unavailable for launching ramps, probably not till the late summer or fall. With our boat ramps, they should be usable throughout the year. There is some concern about the potential impacts to Swan and Kokanee, and the Sheep Creek cut through will be impassable sometime during the summer. With other locations, there will be quite a bit of monitoring to monitor sediment levels at the boat ramps and sediment removal in those locations. The Green River impacts, it's going to be the prolonged 1600 CFS flows on sections A, B, and C, and it could be beneficial to the river, and that'll be sustainable throughout the summertime. So a little bit more, like I said, this is a very busy season for our aquatic section. Biologists will be focusing on 2 important surveys this year, one being the northern leopard frog and then the giant salmon fly. There have been northern leopard frogs found in our region, but we need to document more occurrences. And so if you do find those out and about, please let us know. As well as the giant salmon fly. There's a few historic reports with this, but limited detail. So if you find anything, iNaturalist is a really great app that you can download to your phone, take pictures and submit information, and that will assist us in conducting more information on these animals. Habitat section has also been busy. It was a really great winter for Habitat. They were able to get a lot of their projects completed because of the warmer than usual temperatures. They installed 8 chukar guzzlers through the late winter and the spring, replaced 10 old Buell guzzlers that were in disrepair, and then we'll be repairing 6 guzzlers in the Book Cliffs Roadless area that were damaged in the 2022-2023 winter time. They're working with UDOT currently to implement some road mowing along Highway 208 to increase visibility to motorists. A lot of that has been completed. Well, it has been all completed, Pat. A lot of it's been completed prior to a very predictable dry season. Outreach section, we have quite a few events coming up. Starting in June, Badges and Bobbers is an event that we host with our local law enforcement at Little Montez. It's free for you 17 and under. We'd love anyone to come and bring the kids. It does start at 8 a.m. During the middle of the week. We understand that's tough for working parents, but we're hoping that some of those parents or aunts, uncles, relatives, grandparents can bring their kids out from 8 to noon that day. We also host a series of shooting of sports events at our in our region. And so the Wild West Shoot is a men's shoot. It's going on its 4th year. It's just a simple 22 shoot, but it's a lot of fun, as well as our historic Josie shoot. It's going on its 37th year. And so those will happen on June 5th and 6th at the Buckskin Hill Shooting Complex, with anticipation and hopes that maybe next year we can do it at the new Roseville shooting range. The law enforcement section is very busy. They have an ongoing Bobcat investigation that covered part of Utah and Arizona. This picture shows 70 to 80 total Bobcats that were seized during one of the investigations. The first sale, the Bobcat pelts averaged about $900 a piece. And then our canine officers are being very heavily used in assisting with law enforcement agencies in the area with missing person cases, et cetera. So it's been a very busy season for our law enforcement. Any questions?
All right. Thank you for that. We will move on to the agenda item number 5 with Heather Talley again.
You guys can read.
Yep.
Is this on?
Do you have any updates on this one? Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I actually did want to better articulate why it's important that we have decided to not make vouchers either sex if they are able to be sold. That's something that we might do a few of them like that. Right now, all depredation control permit vouchers are allowed to be either sex. And what we would do is do a proportion of mostly beardless permits. And if it was warranted to offer an either sex permit for harvest of tom, we could do that. But that's unlikely and that's not the purpose of these management hunts, which would be to take hens and decrease populations. For that reason, and because the reason we keep mentioning these season dates being August through the middle of March, and their control permit vouchers, they're only offered in the fall, is to stress that these would be almost entirely beardless permits, which we do feel would curtail any abuse of the program in order to harbor birds on the property, to gain a monetary value from selling those vouchers in an astronomical way. So that's just the reason that we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that these permits would be mostly or entirely beardless. And additionally, as some RACs have felt these changes are too drastic, and then other RACs have felt like we're not making significant enough changes, kind of signals to us that we're in a good spot in the middle. So that's just why we have the recommendations that we do. We are just trying really hard to build tolerance for landowners, compensate them fairly, and by building that tolerance, enabling turkeys to exist on the landscape. So just wanted to make that clear in case I didn't properly articulate that in the past.
Okay, is that for agenda item 6 for the turkey one?
It is,
'Cause
so
we're-
I
okay.
apologize.
No, you're
I do
good,
this
'cause
every time,
it's all right.
but for the upland game, I don't
Because they're
have
kind
any
of combined.
clarifications.
They're kind of
Yeah.
combined on one here, so it's like,
Sure.
I was confused too. So.
You're good. Yeah, so no clarifications on upland game.
Is there any questions from the RAC for Heather on upland game? Any questions from the public? Do we have, I guess we'll move to public comment or any electronic comments. Do we have any for this one?
We do not. That's a negative. There were no comments made for this specific topic.
Okay. Is there any RAC comments? We won't be able to vote on it tonight since we don't have a quorum, but we can still say our opinions and things like that. So, any comments from the RAC? Because we don't have any public comments on this one as well either. So, comments from the RAC?
Agree with the recommendations.
Nope, we don't have enough to vote on
Okay.
it. So, just, if you want to agree, state it. Go ahead and say, yeah, I like it. So. I'm good with it. I think it's some of the changes I saw in there were good as far as the quarter-mile buffer zone requirement in hunting areas and that mandatory harvest reporting as well too. So I thought it was a good thing on that one.
And just to clarify, the mandatory harvest reporting is just for turkeys.
Right.
now. Yeah.
So are we providing comments on the next one or just?
Just number 5. We'll move on to 6 after this one. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 6, then the wild turkey, and Heather kind of already gave that one. So is there any questions from the RAC regarding the agenda item number 6 on the wild turkey recommendations?
Did any of the landowners, ask for vouchers? Like, was this something that they asked specifically to the division
Do you mean to be able to sell them?
to be able to sell?
I believe that some landowners have asked for that ability, yes, and it is already available for big game. Big game does allow the sale of their depredation vouchers.
How successful are the turkey transplant for those ones that are in ag? If you take them somewhere, do they just cause a problem elsewhere? I guess that was
That's something that, so as you've seen that with our turkey release sites that we brought through in 2023, those are updated every 5 years. And part of that is to avoid conflicts, like you're saying, and also to utilize habitat that maybe had some restoration efforts and things like that. So we're always cognizant of all of our release sites, trying to make sure that they're pretty isolated to river corridors and areas where we're not going to cause those problems. As far as the advocacy of translocations, we have seen a really good success. I mean, people do speak of turkeys as being a success story in Utah due to translocations that really started heavily in 1989. And so now here we are, we have them everywhere. And last year was our lowest in a lot of years. I can look up the data if you'd like, but we only had 607 translocations in the state last year. And usually we have around 1,000. So we do still highly prioritize trapping, but sometimes whether it's workload or just a warm winter where they won't go into a trap because there's food widely available, or other areas where maybe trapping just isn't conducive, then that's why we wanted to offer some additional tools.
Which unit is these vouchers most widely used in? Is it more of a northern region one, or do you see it across the state?
So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that there may be a few different programs here that can be conflated. So keeping in mind that these depredation vouchers or control permit vouchers, as they're called, and control permits are issued to landowners on a landowner basis, case by case basis. So as landowners complain and have material damage to their personal and private property, that's when vouchers and permits would be issued to them. So we did ask for an increase from 2 to 5 control permits that would be free, and those are not able to be sold. And they're only available for immediate family members and full-time employees. And then the vouchers, they can get up to 15 or 10% of the offending animals, whichever is less. And those are the vouchers that we would make highly beardless. And so it's not necessarily a unit, it's just where we have the most complaints for material damage from landowners.
Why not just make them all beardless?
The only issue with that is that, as you know, turkeys do like to group up in flocks of, big flocks of toms, big flocks of hens in the wintertime. And so because of that, if there is a large group of toms on somebody's property, we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves. We want to be able to rectify that situation. But we would be cognizant of issuing vouchers for just straight either sex for sure.
How many vouchers would you say get issued across the state?
I can actually look that up for you 1 second. So do you want 2024 or 2025 data or both?
25, please.
All right, 1 second. Last year, for free permits, the total was, it looks like 181. And, or excuse me, that was for the vouchers. The free landowner permits was 251. And 181 were vouchers statewide.
Will those vouchers be underneath the mandatory reporting as well too after
They're
this?
not. We didn't do mandatory reporting for mitigation. We have it for both spring seasons, limited entry general spring season, and for the over-the-counter fall management harvest. But we do have this voluntary survey, and we are getting some good data for that.
Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, we'll go ahead and take questions from the public on this one. Okay, electronic comments, there was nothing. So we will go ahead and move to the public comment period. We'll Chuck Carpenter and then hear from Chris Carden.
This room's tiny. I feel like I'm going to be yelling y'all. Chuck Carpenter. I represent the National Wild Turkey Federation. I'm a district biologist for them. Thank you all for your time, effort, everything, energy into this. We support all the proposed changes that Heather and the division are proposing, except for the commodification of the vouchers, the R657-69-7. We just added turkeys to the conservation easement rule, which hasn't been applied yet, where landowners can get compensated for damages. You have yet to see how that pans out, if that solves all the issues or not. We also are adding, all the landowners got surveyed last year. They asked for more control tags. So we're increasing that from 2 to 5. And those are either sex, and they've been traditionally harvested about 50% toms. So we're going to probably see increase in tom based off of that as well. And then we're also adding them to the urban deer and turkey rule. So municipalities can trap and move turkeys, as I see fit. We actually fund a couple turkey trappers for the division that move a lot of birds around. But really with that, we're changing 4 things that haven't been implemented yet. So we'd like to see those incremental changes be evaluated before we go to commodifying wildlife. We feel like that's going to incentivize landowners to be intolerant of turkeys. And we also see that based off of the surveys, about 33% of the landowners are allowing public hunters to come in and hunt these nuisance birds. So I guess call us old fashioned, but we'd like to still see 16-year-old kids be able to knock on the door and maybe go harvest a bird without handing over a lot of money. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Chris.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks. My name's Chris Carling. We're representing Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. And we, as an organization statewide, approve and support the recommendations as presented by the division. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Chris. Okay, we will go ahead and move to RAC comments. Discussion. I think this is a good thing. I personally like to see birds moved around a little bit, maybe a little more when they have those issues, which they do. I would like to see that a little bit more as well, to kind of put some birds in some places a little bit more across the state. I think around here, it seems like turkeys get hammered pretty hard, and we don't have near as many as what we could have, but I think that's more of predator issues, things like that, as much as anything too. But and again, everybody in the Uinta Basin hunts everything. So if there was a mouse hunt, mice would be already fine.
I guess I would agree with that. Would just like to see a preference on moving them around, because I think there are probably areas that could support them that don't have them right now. I guess this is more of a question, but are we over or under objective statewide?
That is a really good question. We don't have an objective for turkeys statewide. So, and if anybody would like to weigh in, of course, we do go through the RDCC, and I try to give Forest Service a deal on the heads up before our new release sites are implemented, so they have a heads up on that. So we can definitely let you know beforehand and take into consideration other release sites as well.
I think my comment is kind of in line with what national. Let's try to not spice wildlife. See how these other things go first.
I like this as it puts another tool in the toolbox. For management turkeys, especially in areas where there's a lot of depredation issues, and that's where it's concentrated. So it's not like everywhere is, necessarily, but in the areas where there's depredation issues.
I think some of the biggest complaints I hear from people that have turkeys around their places more as they get crawling all over and crapping all over their sidewalk and their porch and whatnot, more than really some of the stuff they eat. But that's just what I hear from people. Guess they should feed them corn.
Is depredation a problem in the Northeast region? Or is that, I mean, you get a significant number of calls in this area.
And I can defer to Dallin on that since he's here and loves to talk because he loves it so much and he's regional.
I'm sorry, would you repeat the question?
How many calls a year do you get for depredation in our region? Is it a lot, or, I would say, I'm guessing that the Cache Valley area is more, and maybe down in the San Rafael with the Dirty Devil area is probably more, but I that's just reasoning. How much do you get a lot here?
For depredation calls for turkeys in the Northeast region, we get very few a year.
Okay.
Probably a handful or less. Most around stored crops, we do the haystacks. A little bit for growing crops, getting into grain or something that's been planted. Most of our calls are actually nuisance calls within city limits. Those are the majority of our turkey calls.
I also have a graph if you did want to look at the difference between the different regions, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
This just shows per region the turkey complaints, and we realize that there may be a little bit of course, you're seeing there in 2026 as we just started. We don't have a lot of data yet there, but that gives you a good trend for over the years. Southeast and Northeast are definitely the fewest of the regions.
Do you anticipate getting more calls if folks are able to sell the vouchers?
I wouldn't anticipate it just because they're beardless. And so I don't think that a lot of people are going to use that as an incentive to make an astronomical amount of money. We don't think that that's going to be a huge issue.
Thanks for that graph. The graph was really helpful.
I have so much more data. Do you want your data?
Yes.
Tell me anything.
Is there any more comments, discussions from the RAC? Okay, well then we will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 7, the CWMU from Darren. Do you have any updates, Darren?
I do, real quick, let me pull this up. I need to clarify, one of the maps in your packet. Now, and I apologize for all the homework I gave you. You've already sat through a 3-hour meeting if you watched the advisory from But, this is the Green Canyon CWMU up here. In the packet, the boundary runs up the highway, and it looks like the CWMU includes those green pieces of Forest Service on the north end. And that was an error. The one that the advisory committee saw is this one. This is correct. So the boundary should go around those Forest Service pieces. So those public lands would not be included. They have in the past, but they would no longer be included. There is about a 40-acre piece of Forest Service on the south end of that little square that is included, and that's because it's landlocked. There's no public access to that ground. In the past, with those big pieces included, they were giving it an additional buck tag to the public. So they'll retain that for private by taking that forest out, but they will continue to allow access to those orange pieces of private ground north of the highways, Blacksmith, Fort Canyon, and Cache Valley, for public access for deer hunting. And so you can trade for that 40-acre piece. That's about, I think it's like 120 acres or something, trade lands for that 40 acres. It's a pretty good trade. So just to make sure everybody's looking at the same thing as we bring these through. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the RAC?
Yeah, this is just a general question. I don't know that much about how these work.
Okay.
Would the ability to access the public land that's being added change? So would a tag that, I used to be able to hunt there, now I can't?
So think about this. CWMUs are essentially hunt boundaries. So in order to hunt that boundary, you have to have a particular permit. In this case, this is a deer only CWMU. So to hunt deer in that red boundary, you have to have that CWMU. Public land, in all cases, is open to the public for all uses and just be restricted for purposes of hunting that particular species, and they'd have to have that permit. All the land management agency requirements are still in place. So if the CWMU wants to hunt on that property that's included, they need to get all the guiding permits from BLM or Forest Service, be that whichever one happens to be. And we are doing everything we can to make sure folks are aware of that. It's still public ground. They still have to abide by the land management agencies regulations. And so we are working on trying to get a checkbox on their COR. So when they apply, they acknowledge that they know they have to have that permitting. But obviously they need to go through either Forest Service or BLM, or I don't know if SIDLA has a formal process, but whatever. So yeah, I hope that's helpful to conceptualize what this is. So again, for purposes of camping, bird hunting, all other activities besides deer hunting, they can still continue to do those. This is probably not the best example, just because that's landlocked. But there's a lot of blocks out that have a lot of checkerboarding, BLM, and in most cases, other than this, if it's a pronghorn CWMU, that'd be the only thing that they need is that specific permit for all their uses would be open. And that's generally true for on the other side of the coin for trade lands. In this case, the trade lands are availably accessed for deer hunting, but they are still private property. And a lot of our CWUs allow general access, but you need to just be aware of what's going on there. You can't access our trade lands on the hunt planner if you want to look where those are. It's a layer. You can turn on the trade lands layer and see where it is. People are interested in hunting those trade lands. And yeah, I think I'm going on quite a while. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. And just to clarify, the hunt boundary is only changing for the species that are authorized in that.
Yeah, so in this case, elk these guys don't have an elk CWMU, so elk hunting would be, this essentially doesn't exist for the boundary for elk is probably the obvious. So.
With the mandatory hunting for recording and the GPS ability, I guess that's how maybe the division gonna look at how successful these trade-offs are in terms of hunt, like getting.
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. I'll look into that. It's just,
See if there, it's people thinking.
yeah, I think that, I don't know, we'll see how much that's used. I gotta be honest, I guess I need to dig into exactly how that works a little bit more. It's kind of been happening over on the big game world, but I'd really be interested in looking at that. Hopefully I can bring that back at some point.
And the other question with, corner crossing, was there any discussion about
We haven't changed,
some of these units?
Yeah.
Board and you could potentially
right.
get to them now.
Insofar as whether corners count as being contiguous, we haven't changed any rules, so we still consider touching corners as does count as contiguous property. The definition of contiguous in state code says it has to share a common boundary. That doesn't really address the 10th Circuit ruling. Yeah, so for now, I think
There hasn't been any.
yeah, as far as
discussion.
access goes, I would say for the purposes of CWMUs, one of the reasons that you might be able to include public land is to define a boundary, just so people kind of know where they are. And I think, those checkerboard sections, I suspect we'll look at it, but I think we probably still continue to recommend some of that, just so people kind of know if they're there or not, and try not to confuse folks. But we haven't made any decisions to change anything this time.
So when you're looking at adding, like Forest Service or BLM land in exchange for the trade lands, are you considering like trying to get a similar
Yeah.
type?
Yeah, that the CW Advisory Committee meeting that I linked in the packet, again, that was a long meeting, but they really do get weeds on that. They want to know, is it comparable? What's the trade for? Is it comparable? Is the public getting compensated appropriately? And in some cases, for example, Oldland Plateau, they actually asked that if they want to include Forest Service, that they give an additional buck and we'll help tag to the public in order to do that. So they'll make adjustments like that, try to make sure that it's equitable. And they have trade land as well. So they're helpful.
Are they able to fence the boundaries that include?
They have to, so for trade lands, they have to post them as trade lands. They do have to post their boundary, but they can't add fencing to public land. They, that again, land management agency would have to be involved, and that would be the purposes of hunting.
Sorry, I guess I just have one more question.
Sure.
What involvement, if any, do the land management agencies have?
Probably this is the process, so you get a chance to look at it. We don't typically, again, since it's just a hunt boundary, we're not limiting access per se. But again, we have the advisory committee look at it. They're in particular about, we don't usually, the rule is we don't include public land unless there's compelling reason to do so. And the public needs to get some compensation for that.
Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, I'll take some questions from the public if there's any. When everybody jump up at once. Okay, we will move on to the electronic comments. We do have one.
So this one had one strongly agree on the comment, and there were no comments left. So just strongly agree.
Okay, public comments, we don't have any for this. So we will go ahead and move to the RAC discussion and on this one.
Yeah, I think it's great, the adding a requirement to coordinate with the land management agency so we don't get in a pickle with outfitters. Just to make sure that we can get them an SRP or whatever they need.
You're referring to permitting that's already in place.
Like if someone wanted to guide on if that was BLM land, we would have to issue them a permit. So
That or Forest Service, they'd have to have their permits to guide on it. I see what you're saying on that. I would agree too. I'm not sat through any of the CWMU meetings, but I know they go through it pretty extensive in those meetings talking about this. Like Darren mentioned, I think it was a 3-hour meeting or something on the last one. So I think they kind of go through that, and even on the CWMU one, the people who do guide, I know I've seen where people have had issues with guides on it. And that does come up in that CWMU advisory board, whether they can guide on it or not, if they're having issues with that, with the no permits or things like that, I think because we're assuming so. I think the CWMU is a great program. I think it's one where people have embraced it pretty well. We don't see it as much here. We only have a few, so we're not as used to the CWMUs in the Northeastern region as they are in others. But I think it's good for a lot of them, and I like to see where the trade-off. I don't like to see public land be locked out as far as for certain species, but the trade-off on a lot of it, I think they've worked hard to make that trade-off with lands, or whether public gets a permit, that kind of extra permits for the different things. So I think the CWMU process is a good process on that. So.
this probably isn't a huge concern, but I would just encourage coordination. I'm thinking specifically of like grazing. So like we could let the permittee know and stuff. Probably won't affect them all that much, but
So if you were making a motion tonight, you'd say to include the land agencies a little bit more on the process, what I'm kind of hearing.
yes, I would.
I can agree with that. I think that'd be a good one. Any other RAC discussion on this item? All right, we'll move on then, to the compensation for agenda item number 8, R657-24, compensation for mountain lion, bear, wolf, and eagle damage. Chad Wilson. Do you have any updates or anything on that?
No, it's pretty short. So yeah, if you have any questions on it, the answer.
Okay, any questions from the RAC on that? I have one. I mean, how much, and I kind of know the answer, but how much damage are we seeing from, like, just say bald eagle or from eagles in general? I know up in some areas they see quite a bit with their lambs.
Yeah, and I would say it's bears and cougars are by far the majority, and then it's eagles. And even the way the law is we don't pay on eagles unless we have leftover money. So, but yeah, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but there's some, but it's not as much as bears and cougars.
As far as like, where does the money come from? Is that appropriated every year?
Yeah, so we get half, and so like for eagles, we can only pay half because we can't use our funds. I'm trying to think if I got this right, but we can only use half of them. So we provide some that some state does.
Okay, any other questions from the RAC? Any questions from the public? We do not have any public comments on this one as either, so we'll just go ahead and move to any RAC discussion on it.
Might be a dumb question, but does this only apply to private land?
No, it's agriculture. So yeah, whether it's on public or private.
think it's a good thing to help out with a little more for the compensation to help a few more people to help them to find that, because I know that it's hard for the government trappers and that bill get there, or even division people to see whether it was what took it or that type of deal. So I think that's a good thing to be able to designate more people to can document that loss. So I like the idea of it. Any other RAC discussion on this item? We will move on to agenda item number 9. R 657-11, taking fur bearers and trapping. Chad Wilson.
Yeah, so if I can, I'll just give you a brief history of how the division got to this recommendation. Before House Bill 469 is the one that allows for the hunting and trapping of cougars with a combination or hunting license. Before that happened, we tried many times to increase cougar permits through the public process. And we just weren't able to increase them sufficiently enough that many people got frustrated through that process. That frustration built over years to the point where the state legislature decided to pass House Bill 469. When House Bill 469 was passed, there were many people, groups and individuals that had concern about specifically legal traps being out there for cougars. They asked that we not allow that method to be used. The Wildlife Board decided not to put any restrictions on trapping at that time, but the division did commit that we would look at the data over 3 years. And if we saw anything where modification could be made, that we would come back through this process and make that recommendation. And so that's why we're here today. We fulfilled that commitment of looking at that data. We saw that over the 3 years of snares that there's been 7 cougars a year on average that have been snared. So a low number, right? Fairly low. It's 1.2% of the cougars harvested that way. So we also received with that feedback, and we continue to receive feedback from all sorts of groups about their concern with having legal sets on the landscape. So just putting all that together where it didn't feel like this was a method that was being utilized by sportsmen to lethally take cougars. And there was a concern and a risk. There's a risk if you're out, walking your dog, if you have your hounds, whatever, there's those risks. Based off of those risks and utilization, we decided to recommend that we not allow lethal sets on public land. To be clear, we're not recommending that lethal sets for cougars go away. They'd still be able to be used on private land. Our ag partners would be able to use them still to protect their livestock on grazing allotments as well.
So does that include public land grazing allotments?
Yes.
So basically all of public land.
So really the only people this is for the trapper that can't use a snare, but on public land, but the rest of the government trapper, if you're a cattleman or that type of deal, they could use it, correct?
Yes.
And the division, if we use it as a team.
Yes. Yeah, this would just be for sports harvest.
Are these same groups or people also claim for other fur bearers involved? These type of traps? Because it seems like it might lead to
No,
something like that.
so what we've seen is it's been mostly for lethal traps. I mean, I'm sure that
Yeah.
there are sentiments out there that they don't want some of the other traps as well, but we look at the data, right? That we get quite a bit of trapping of cougars harvest with the other sets. So there's no interest on our end to take that in further. This is where our recommendation.
Okay. About lethal traps for other species.
Yeah,
Are they also
That's not on the table for us either.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So for, if a livestock operator wanted to implement this method or hire a trapper to do so, is there any requirement for them to coordinate with the land management agency?
I don't believe so.
Well, I mentioned that because it would be helpful for us to know if and where that was happening.
Yeah, I mean, we can explore that. We can have thoughts about potentially.
Do they coordinate with you at all though? Like, they're going, the government trappers going out today, like, you know, where those people's traps is over.
Like the allotment, right? Not exact locations, but yeah, they let us know, hey, we've got a cougar eating sheep over here, so we're gonna be out setting traps in that area to try to get that.
And they use all sorts of different traps.
Yeah, they have probably whatever they're feel like they're most efficient with is probably pretty exhaustive.
So is it more of a social compromise than versus, because you're, so few are taken by these lethal traps, it doesn't seem like it. Should be a lot of sort of toolbox versus, I don't know.
I think that's our feeling on it is, it doesn't feel like we're really taking very much away because there's just not this hasn't been utilized, right? So we're not taking anything away, and same breath we're making other people probably feel a little bit better about how they use public land.
Yeah, I guess I would just, reiterate and encourage some discussion. Just, I don't know how like the liability and stuff would work, but it's a low risk, I'm sure, but there's a small risk, and it would be nice if we knew where they were.
I guess to Jordan's point, I'm trying to figure out how, and maybe I don't know what the grazing allotments are, but it seems like the entire state is a grazing allotment, whether it's forest or, I mean, there's very little it's not. So when we're saying that we're only allowing them on private lands and grazing allotments, that it becomes the rule, not the exception at that kind of point. And so, but also, against what Jordan is saying, it's when you add another step of bureaucracy, sometimes that makes it quite difficult when you're going to the land managers. And so I don't know exactly. I guess I'm trying to figure out where's the teeth here.
As far as the teeth here.
Well, it's just, I mean, if it's going to be private only, then private only. But I guess, but since this is a wildlife organization, not a land organization. Do we have the ability to say not on public land, I guess, and so.
Yeah, so this would just be a method of take. So you'd actually still be able to trap cougars.
You can still use foot traps,
Yeah,
right?
You can still
That's not
use it. So it'd just be one method that we say don't target cougars with legal sets. And like we have that ability, the wildlife board has that ability to make those cover.
Then I would just say not on private land, because it seems like once you start getting on private land only, but as soon as you started getting into the public land zone, that adds a whole another level of complexity. And for the public, for me running my bird dogs, for me, and so because I'm not going on private land unless I know it's there, right? And so I'm always concerned about having lethal traps. And when I'm running my dog's 500 yards away because I've got them on a radio collar. It's still in my control, but that is a concern to have those on public land for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of making an assumption here, but I would assume that most of the effort, and maybe you could answer this question, but it would probably be related to livestock management. So it seems like the only people who this really affects is just like someone who's recreationally trying to do it.
Exactly.
I know there's been a lot of pushback all directions on this one. Has the legislature reached out at all? Because they're the ones who kind of started this. They said,
They have not reached out to me. But that is probably part of the risk, right? Like, so I gave that example of how we got here, and part of that example was frustrations leading up to it. If pets start getting, well, I shouldn't say if pets start, pets do get caught. We usually don't talk very loud about that. But potentially, if that frustration builds on that end,
but I guess I
it could go to the
other way, like, they could be like, why is the division even getting involved? We said what you want, it's supposed to happen.
No, we're good there because the law is you can trap tigers, right? You can trap them 365. We're not taking away the ability to trap cougars 365. We're taking away, we're recommending to limit one method.
But they could come back and say, why are you doing that? We want it all type of traffic, right? If they could.
Yeah, we're comfortable that we're in a spot where,
So just to clarify, when you say it's allowable on a grazing allotment, is it just that it happened on a grazing allotment, or are you like requiring any kind of proof of coordination with the permittee?
what we're trying to do is allow livestock producers to protect their livestock.
For sure, but like if I went out pretty much anywhere on BLM, it would be on a grazing allotment. So I guess my question is, are you requiring any kind of proof that this was like requested or whatever by the permittee?
Yeah, and so for them, they can actually just do it. Them or their agents can put the traps out. Now, if we get Department of Ag, those trappers involved, at that point, that's where there's a little bit more coordination with us. Usually there's a problem at that point, but they can be around there a lot. Trap as needed.
Could I go do it on their allotment without asking them?
No, it has to be either the producer or an agent. So I guess if you became their agent, you could.
Okay.
That explains these better, doesn't it?
That'd probably be more of a law enforcement issue to investigate whether they actually did have proof to be an agent for that grazer. So it'd probably be more of a law enforcement question, is what I would say.
And I would say too, like, this is usually when we're talking about it, it's usually just around where the herds. That's where they're focusing on protecting herds. So it's like they might have a big allotment, but they're concentrated here. That's where they trap. Not the whole entire allotment.
But there is language in the amended law that they have to be an agent or working for them or the producer.
Yeah, producer or agent.
Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, any questions from the public?
Just maybe more of a question to the RAC, right? Because we don't have a full quorum here. What does that mean as far as these recommendations, and how does that transfer up to the wildlife board?
We can view our opinion, we can state what we want here. We just can't make a motion to say, this is what we did, we passed it unanimously, that type of deal. But we do have wildlife board members here, Bob Christensen, Kent Nelson's online, so it's Gary Nelson, Kent Johnson are online. So they're listening. The rest of,
Chris Robinson.
oh, I didn't see Chris on there, okay? And anyhow, so we have several wildlife board members and they hear this on there as well too, the different things. And so they're taking that into consideration, even though we can't make a motion on it.
Thank you for answering that. And I know, Chad, thank you for answering questions all these last couple of weeks. We've peppered you with a lot of them, so I don't want to go back through there, but I remember hearing something about, yeah, I think it was the Northern RAC meeting, right? Where snaring is a very successful tool to the ADC and to the producers and their agents. Somewhere upwards of 75% of the lines that they harvest and take, they use snares. Is that your data you have? Did you go back after those meetings and find out how many lions those ADC and people were taking?
Phil was the one that said that, and I trust Phil, so I didn't go back to verify that. So that I assume that that's correct. That's it.
Chad, I mean, I know you've taken a lot of questions this last week and done your best to answer those, so we appreciate that. Thanks.
Any other questions from the public on this one? I do not believe we have any electronic on this one. Comments. So we will go ahead and move to the public comments. We have 3 of them. The first one will be from Chris Snell, then Tanner Carlson, and Rodney Smith. If anybody else wants to make a comment on it, the cards are outside. Bring it up to us. And remember, if you're with a group, you have 5 minutes. If you are representing yourself, you'll have 3 minutes. So
Hi again.
Go ahead.
My name's Chris Snell. I represent the Utah Trappers Association. I just wanted to, come up here and let you know what a great association we have and some great members that that know their tools and know their trades. Utah Trappers Association is an organization that just celebrated celebrated our 50th anniversary. Our mission has always been and continues to be to preserve our trapping heritage by promoting modern, humane, and ethical practices, which has provided predator management at no cost to sportsmen and government agencies. We were surprised, like many others, when the Utah State Legislature passed House Bill 469, which significantly changed the management framework for cougars by removing many previous protections. We believe strongly science-based wildlife management remains essential for healthy cougar populations and balanced ecosystems. For many years, our members have wanted to be able to harvest a cougar on their own with traps, but contrary to popular belief, the Utah Trappers Association had not campaigned for this legislation in any way. It was becoming obvious to everyone that our deer herds were struggling, and if we were going to rebuild them in most areas of Utah, the cougar populations needed to be managed and reduced. And this has been proven by extensive radio collaring that has been implemented by the division. The DWR has been trying to accomplish this by increasing the cougar harvest objective quotas in these areas, but quotas were not being reached. Modern tools used in trapping today is probably the most humane, ethical, and by far most effective method of predator control. Trapping in any form had previously not been allowed to reach these quotas. Up until 2023, it was believed by many that one group of people should be harvesting the cougars. Trappers were never part of the equation and were not asked if they could be part of the solution. We don't think cougars should be annihilated, but like all wildlife, they need to be managed. And had we been asked, we could have offered other options. No bag limits, quotas, or regulations across the state doesn't seem like the right answer. When targeting cougars, property size foothold traps, and cable restraints, snares with relaxing locks, which is designed to restrain rather than kill, would be one option which hasn't been considered. If a dog that is leash trained or leash broke or is accustomed to being tied up strays and gets caught in a cable restraint, it will be waiting for his handler unharmed. As we've heard in these different meetings, a lot of the houndsmen and different people, even that have their dogs caught in locking snares, most dogs won't find a snare with a non-relaxing lock if they have been tied up and trained. We would encourage implementing a required cougar trapping course. This would be similar to the current Coyote Valley course, but would focus on ethical methods of harvesting cougars. As you can see, trapping cougars is being very effective in the new stud units, where deer herds have been struggling most. When we saw this recommended rule change, we reached out to our members with an email asking for feedback without trying to sway them in any direction. The overwhelming response we received was in opposition to this rule change, not primarily because every member plans to snare a cougar, but many see this as the beginning of a slippery slope. We're losing our privileges one at a time, like what has happened in our surrounding states. We believe that a more unit-specific approach to managing cougars would be much better than throwing a blanket over the whole state without target numbers in any areas. Will result in under-harvest in some areas and over-harvest in others. We oppose the amendment and suggest tabling this recommendation, giving time to evaluate the options and invite the Utah Trappers Association to be included in the discussion. We as trappers believe in science-based wildlife management that will support healthy, sustainable populations of deer, cougars, and other wildlife species. We hope that the final decision does not lead us down the same slippery slope that will lead to all of us losing our opportunities to pursue our way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Tanner Carlson, and then after that.
Thank you for your time. Tanner Carlson, representing SFW. It's our recommendation that the RAC does not pass the proposal as presented. Snares are a vital tool in controlling predators. There are several areas in the state that see little or no hound use. A statewide ban makes no sense and is unacceptable. SFW would ask the RAC to pass a motion, can't do it tonight, dang, requesting the DWR to come up with a recommendation that allows the trapping of lions with snares and address the concerns of pets and hounds. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Rodney. And you have 3 minutes.
And I guess remember the wildlife board is listening.
That's good.
You're good.
I mean that in a good
Sounds
way.
like a profile. I am, like in the meetings, I'm not gonna lie, so.
That's good.
Right now, I'm gonna represent the Houndsman Association. and I'm gonna
Thank you.
represent
Yes, 5
myself after
minutes.
that. So, I'm just gonna read this real quick and hopefully I don't mess up. The Utah Houndsman Association supports ethical trapping as both a wildlife management tool and a longstanding tradition. We believe in protecting the trapping. We believe in protecting the future of trapping, require reducing negative attention to lethal trapping while understanding the concerns of the Trappers Association about increasing regulations. We see the proposal as a way to help preserve trapping long-term, unlike other methods, lethal trapping. That is, sorry, lost track here. Lethal trapping that can kill non-targeted animals. Since the lion snare approved, we have lost 11 hounds since the House bill has been passed. So that's kind of the rough what Houndsman Association. I think Houndsman Club would like to work a little bit more with the state on this, but we also support this bill. Now for my take, I am supportive of this bill. A lot of houndsmen are pretty passionate about this. Just for the sole fact that you can't in a snare, even if you have, we're talking about these locking snares. Anything that has the word snare in it, in my opinion, is lethal, period. You're not going to come to your backyard and you put a snare there and say, hey, this is a non-lethal snare. You're not going to do it. I promise you. So I'm a little bit emotional about this because several years ago I had called state, local DWR around here and got, made sure I was good on going down to Stewart's Lake and went down there took my dogs down there and talked to the state, and they're, yeah, go right ahead. You know, you'll be helping the bird hunters out, you know, get rid of some raccoons. Okay, go down there. Went down there and I lost two of my dogs down there for somebody that took it upon themselves to put poison out. I lost two dogs that I valued at $8,000. That's pretty upsetting. They were finished dogs. They were my friends. It's not fun to lose a dog. And that's why I'm against this snaring. We can just do footholds. You know, this was a gift, like I said, from legislation. This was a gift to the trappers. Like, hey, here you go. We're just asking to tweak it a little bit. We gave you 3 years. Let's tweak it a little bit. Let's work together on this. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any more public comments, so we will go ahead and move to the, well, we didn't do electronic. There was no. We'll go ahead and move to the RAC discussion on it.
Am I hearing that we're killing more dogs than we are cougars this way?
Or is it only lost 11 hounds?
Yeah, so 11 over 3 years, or we've killed 21 cougars over 3 years.
But are all those dogs in cougar snares? Because we're not eliminating snares because there's trappers that run just snares. That's all they run are snares. And they'll run them for bobcats, coyotes through all the time. And so you're not necessarily eliminating snares for that. So how many of those dogs were eliminated just on the mountain lion? So in my opinion, this isn't really this is just a feel good thing, to be honest with you. You're talking to a guy who is a trapper, who has held 2 mountain lions in my trapping, past trapping, and in a lake hole. But this doesn't do much other than feels good. That's all. Because it's not solving there. You don't got a lot of people that are really snaring for mountain lions, so it's not really doing much. I got a lot of good houndsman friends who are totally opposed to this. They do not want us, they want snares gone. They wanted them gone clear before legislature ever even come out with open season on mountain lions. So I'm kind of torn on it. I don't want to see trappers lose that right, but also I don't think this solves anything, to be honest with you. I don't think it does a darn thing.
I would agree with that sentiment 100%. And then a couple other things. If you were out on BLM land and your dog got caught in a snare and died, who would you call? Probably the BLM, right? And we would have no idea where those were. You know, on that same line, if someone called us and said, I'm gonna go run dogs, are there any lethal traps out there? Would have no idea. And it's 21, what was it, 21 to 11 or something? That's tough. I mean, I would encourage Wildlife Board to consider at some kind of compensation or just, you know, eliminating the lethal trapping. And if none of those work, the BLM would definitely want to know where these are.
If I used a heart attack med that half the time twice the time it fixed the heart attack and the other one it killed you, that would be a problem. I couldn't recommend that. And I think that's where I am now. And I hate the idea of taking away a capture option for a group of people. That doesn't sit well with me. But if it's killing half the dogs at a 2-to-1 ratio, it's successful twice and then kills the dog the other half, that's unacceptable.
On mine, I don't know, this is a hard one because losing dogs, people, is not good. So it's in a way, the ability, I guess, hurting some of the trappers at the same time. We have all the other methods that are more effective. I don't see it as an option once we do this, they're gonna take away other trapping methods. It's already in the Constitution. It's the Utah Constitution that trapping
Is codified, is good.
so.
I guess like are 21 lions worth this amount of potential risk? And potential liability concerns.
I think it was only 4 lions that somebody caught with that. Good snares.
So to clarify on that, it's 21 over the 3 years this last year.
And 11 dogs over 3 years as well, is what we're saying?
Yeah.
With this method or all snares?
With this method.
With lion snares.
Were all those caught by public sportsmen, or were those, other people that ABC
So as far as I know,
producers?
we're not making it up as a club.
Oh,
Just, I've read some stuff that's pretty upsetting on Facebook. We're not making this shit up. Period.
I think it's tough for, the reasons we stated. It is kind of just punishing, taking away a method from the general public. And it doesn't seem to be very, like, it's a tool in a toolbox, but it's not doing a whole lot, I guess.
It would seem like the wildlife board, and unfortunately, we can't do that. We need to verify these numbers, right? I mean, I trust and verify, I guess is what I'm saying, but if the numbers are as said, that would certainly sway me.
Any other RAC discussion on this? Richard and Tasha, you guys been quiet on that?
It's just a double-edged sword, really, in my opinion. I don't really want to go down the line of potentially taking away some, I mean, you said it's codified in the Utah Constitution. I don't know, taking away something like that from trappers. But then also, you have the problem with dogs, but maybe there's a compromise there. They're talking to, but I don't know. It's a tough topic, for sure.
I think the houndsmen were very underrepresented through this whole process on it as well, and they're very passionate about it. And they would really like to see this pass, and I can see exactly why. I can understand it. So it's a hard one.
Last year I was hunting quail right here in the valley on private land. I want to make that clear. And I had kind of a carte blanche to go ahead and hunt from the owner, but he hadn't updated me that a trapper had come in. And so I had a dog caught in a foot trap and a dog caught in a snare within 10 minutes of each other. And there was nothing bad happened, but it was a tense situation. I would hate to see that in Sydney, but my dogs are all within 400 yards. Unlike you might have a hard time, a houndsman might have a hard time getting to their dog within time to loosen the snare.
I don't have any history with the relaxing lock snare. I'd like to see that before we even put that in, made that motion to see how it works. But I would rather see something like that before we try that, before we eliminated it totally. But that's just kind of how I feel on it.
Sounds like our recommendation would be to table.
Kind of sounds like it would be to table it.
I guess I'll just kind of repeat again, it's a tough topic. Communication with the land management agency, I think, could help alleviate some potential problems. And then just consider if this amount of controversy is worth the amount of lions that it's taken.
I think kind of sounds like the groups weren't really talked to, and I'd like to see the groups get together and come up with a better one, like a committee, even if that was the case, between houndsmen's and those ones, but anyhow. Any other discussion on this? Appreciate everybody's comment on this one, but it's the one they all showed up for, so I appreciate you. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 10. The division land rule, and invite Chelsea back up.
Let's go talk outside.
Yes, please talk outside because we can hear your side conversation.
Can I say that real quick? We had a board member that was online that could hear a conversation out here, so he's having a hard time hearing. So audience, keep it down.
I'll crack the whip.
Do you have any updates on the division land rule?
Not necessarily an update, but I would love to just give you just some history and some background, just to make sure that you see how we got here and why you're looking at this rule. So if you remember last year, I presented this same rule, and that was in response to House Bill 309 that the legislature passed that required a hunting, fishing, or combination license for anybody accessing the waterfowl or wildlife management area in class 1 and 2 counties. So that really only impacted those properties on the Wasatch Front and the central northern region. This rule still is a rule change, and so we came in and brought it through the rough cycle. And then there was some public opinion about that, and so the legislature reopened that law this year. And so this year, House Bill 30 was passed, and they made some changes to that law. So now you can have a hunting, fishing, or combination license to access WMAs, or there's now a free option to get a digital access permit. You watch an educational video, the division puts out, acknowledge a statement that access might be limited by the division, and then also we have to ask for a donation or make a donation towards WMAs. And part of this new law rolls it out to all WMAs statewide over a 3-year period. So this will be impacting WMAs in this region over the next 3 years.
On that new little part or whatever, for those people who don't have a license, how long is that process gonna take? Like, is it a 5-minute thing to click on and you're done, or is it more?
It'll be really quick. So the video, it hasn't been fully finished yet. It'll be between 2 and 3 minutes, and really just focused on broad overall learning objectives about how are WMAs managed, how were they purchased, what are they for, just that general high level thing. They'll just acknowledge a statement and then ask for donation, and then you're done, and then you'll get your real digital access. I think that'll be on the top the same way you can do everything else. And we're also updating our signage, so that way if you encounter a wildlife management area and you're going and you don't have one of those options, you can scan a QR code and then take that course really quick before you access the WMAs you're in compliance with.
It's funny because I just noticed on social media or somebody was posted that they got to the thing and they saw the sign and they're all up in arms. Not being able to get on, so all those signs will be taken down and put up or changed.
Yes, we're working on updating signage right now on the current 30 WMAs that this law impacted last year. We'll need to update those signs with this new law. This goes into effect July 1. So we're actively working.
So could people still get cited between now and July 1st?
Correct. So the current law that was in place that started last year is still in effect until July 1st. So this new digital access permit process will not be available until July 1st on those 30 WMAs. Currently, law enforcement isn't citing. It's more of an educational opportunity to educate the public about what WMAs are for and give warnings. Law enforcement
Has there been any discussion about treating the WMAs that have been open to grazing differently? Like, I guess my point is, if I went somewhere and I had to get a permit to go on there, but there were cattle all over the place, it would be confusing.
So you mean like as a user of the WMA, not necessarily the grazer themselves?
Right.
Okay, Pat, do you want to talk about grazing and timing and access on your properties? That might be a better question for Pat.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm Pat Rainbolt, Habitat Program Manager for the Northeast region. Could you repeat that? Exactly, kind of. Exactly what you're getting at.
Sorry, yeah, are all, so the class 1 and 2, what are the rest of them, I guess? My question is, are people still gonna need this permit for the WMAs that are open to grazing?
Yes, and in our Northeast region, we have, the classes are based on the populations in the counties. And we're class 3, I think we have some class 4 WMAs, so this won't go into implementation in our region until 2028. And as far as the grazing, the grazing, has to be done through, they have a permit that's issued through us, it goes through process and that. So, as far as the general public, they'll just be held to those same rules if they need a permit.
Are grazers getting in the way of public recreation of your WMAs? I think that's is that what you're asking?
Or is it more like a perception? If someone
Yeah.
showed up and said, hey, there's cows here, like,
Yeah, I guess that's more my question.
yeah, and that's how the division is a little bit different from other land use agencies. And that we use grazing as a tool to manage habitat that best fits the needs of that WMA. And we do have grazing on a lot of our WMAs, and it varies by the elevation and our habitat goals for those WMAs, what time of year that is, the stocking rate, and different things like that. So that's something the public would encounter on our WMAs in this region.
Thanks, Pat.
And I'll just add to the digital access permit or the license, that would be good for all WMAs. So we have 150 wildlife and waterfowl management areas across the state. So you definitely have, like, people aren't to buy a pass or something for one particular property.
Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, we'll move on to questions from the public. Okay, electronic comment wise, we didn't have anything on it. So there are no public comment cards, so we'll move to the RAC discussion on it. Is there any RAC discussion on this one?
I would just say thanks for the clarification that, 1 is good for all.
I think it's, I think the program seems might be a burden to some people, but I think it's important for the general public to know that funders are funding these lands, and they shouldn't. The education seems like a good step.
Well, the other thing with the WMAs is also the ones that have been donated, the property has been acquired from private landowners who wanted to see it. So I think it's a really good story, just like the one we had up in Daggett County. They just recently done. That's a great one where the family wanted that land to be in WMA so people could still use it, their kids. And I think that's what this story tells on these WMAs, is how these lands are managed, but also how they were acquired through different things like that as well too. So. Any other comments or discussion on it? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, the wildlife consultation procedure and renewable energy facilities. Daniel Holtz. Do you have any updates for us or anything?
If it's okay, could I provide just some really brief
Yeah,
background? on this
please.
one, since it's
Please do.
Okay. So this legislative session, 2 bills were passed that require the owners and operators of solar and wind farms to consult with DWR on their projects when they're developing them. The bill also directs us to create an administrative rule that defines how that consultation process happens. So our decisions based on this one's kind of small. It's just like, how do we consult with these folks? And so that's what this rule is that we've written. The bills don't give DWR the authority to approve or deny a project. It's just for us to have an opportunity to sit down with the operators of these projects and say, and let them know what species might be in the project area, and then what the potential impacts might be, and ways that we can lessen those impacts on wildlife. And then when the owners of the facilities go to get permittings, when they go to the county to seek permit for it, they have to provide proof that they consulted with us, and that the county has to consider those recommendations. It's kind of how the process is laid out. The rule that we read just is kind of a streamlined process for this consultation process to happen. We have an electronic form that people can fill out to request consultation. We'll meet with the folks within a couple of weeks of that request, and then we'll provide them with a letter of our recommendations. Happy to answer any questions you guys might have on that.
Does this apply to federal lands as well?
Yeah, all lands.
Private as well, right?
Right.
Private, all of it.
I'm just wondering if it would be maybe easier to include it like in our NEPA process. Like the action agency could consult with DWR instead of the proponent. Because we're going to be analyzing all that stuff anyways.
Right. So, yeah, that's a good point, Jordan. So there'll be a little bit of duplication with this. If you go through the NEPA process, you're going to definitely have all the information you need to consult with DWR. So that extra burden won't be too much, but you're right, though, there's a little bit of redundancy there.
So you're hoping that a county will take into consideration if a person doesn't want to do some offset mitigation, maybe that they might decline that until they do some offset mitigation. Was that the hope with the bill when it went through, or?
Yeah. So it doesn't give DWR the authority to dictate anything. Will all be the local jurisdictions that get to decide that. But I think at least we're all kind of going into this project with our eyes open and understanding the impacts, and the counties can weigh whether that impact's worth it or not, and kind of maybe help push the developer into a direction where they do more mitigation and offset those impacts if possible.
Any other questions from the RAC?
So the Accountant Society, if they do mitigation, what they were saying, so I'm trying to, because like, I do need, but I've done it for BLM in the forest. I don't remember the part where they had that county permission. to do Development.
They probably have to have a conditional use permit through the county.
Okay,
through
conditional
anything.
use. Okay. Do they get that before they come to us?
I'm not sure on that process, but I would.
Jordan?
I
I'm not sure
don't
if that's
think if it came to us, I don't think we would consider, unless the county had reached out to us and commented on what we're
Said
doing.
something. I guess we never really looked at this. But I was just wondering like what that process was, if they go to the county first, then they're coming to you. And then to us.
Well, these
So it
projects,
seems like we could maybe, yeah, like.
these
what is it,
projects are bigger,
48?
where like it would be like, say, building a building, so they'd have to have a county building permit or something like that versus say a trail where you just do the NEPA process through it. So that's probably why they have to do the approval and go through the county and that type of deal. It's a bigger scale project than just like a trail or a bridge or something like that you just do straight NEPA.
Yeah, well, we would do on all NEPA on facilities, all the infrastructure, not.
But that's
just
why it would go through the county
trails.
first.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just didn't know what the process was, if they went to the county first and then to us, or
Yeah.
to us, then the county, and say, well, we have the NEPA approved by Forest or BLM.
It's actually separate. like when I'll just tell you through oil and gas wise, you deal with the BLM for your permit through there. But if you have a county road crossing, you reach out to the county to get your county road crossing or anything like that. And then you work with the county on that. So it's totally separate from working with the BLM or even the state on it, or even Forest Service. It's just a whole nother thing that they'd have to go through.
So would they not come to the land agency before they had that approval? Is that the hope?
I think they would go to the land owner first, right, and establish some type of lease. And then they would hopefully come to us and consult with us by recommendations.
Yeah.
And they would seek the permitting.
Like, I don't think it's probably anywhere in our regulations, so I guess I see it as maybe an opportunity to just collaborate a little bit and.
Because usually like when I worked for BLM doing Sage Grouse Initiative, I would get the proposal from the proponent and I'd send that to like Brian Maxfield here and he would send it to Flipco and then Flipco would come back with recommendations and mitigation and then we incorporate that into NEPA.
Yeah, but the only reason we did that is because we had a regulation and I don't think we
Yeah.
do for this.
Yeah, it's a good point, Natasha. So we do provide a lot of feedback on projects that are required to, so we, you guys, touch projects. So yeah. And it'll be a learning year for all of us,
Okay.
how this works out.
We love like as much input as we can
Yeah.
get from the DWR, honestly. So yeah, I'm just wondering if we could maybe combine the efforts on that.
Make sure it's incorporated into maybe the NEPA process on the federal side so
Yeah.
that we're not coming up with different mitigation measures for analyses.
And the other thing too that I mentioned is if there's threatened or endangered species involved in this, there'll still be consultation required with Fish and Wildlife Service. And they'll have their mitigation requirements related to those species.
Like what teeth does it have if they don't get this approval, I guess?
So if they don't get approval or if they don't.
If they don't consult.
They don't seek it. Oh, I don't know. What the term is.
Is that something we have to look at on our end or something?
Right.
No, I think it goes back to the county. This is all a voluntary thing. This is just voluntary for them to go to it. If they don't do it, then the county can say, can advise on it and say whether they approve it or not, correct?
So it's not voluntary. So with these bills, they are required to consult.
But to
And
do
the
anything
county is
with it,
required to
right?
consider the wildlife recommendations. But as far as what the penalties are for all, I don't know. You know, Chelsea. Yeah.
Chelsea again. Oh my gosh, that's great. It's on. Okay. I assist with the legislative session, so I was helpful in working through this bill. So I just wanted to explain the application process is your application to the county or the city, whoever the local jurisdiction is, it's not complete unless you have the recommendation letter from the division. So technically the county or the city wouldn't have a complete application until that's included. So there's really nothing about teeth. It's just that you wouldn't have completed the
They won't
requirements. to
permit it
submit.
until that's done.
Exactly.
But we would, I think. That's what I'm saying. I think there's a little bit of a disconnect.
So I just wanted to clarify that if that's okay. As the lands coordinator, I deal with the zoning and all that good thing. So you have to remember the state and the federal government, they're the sovereign. So their jurisdiction is higher than the county jurisdiction. So if somebody comes to the BLM or the Forest Service and they have a permit to build, a solar farm, there's no additional county zoning or permits that need to take place because that jurisdiction is higher than the county's jurisdiction or the city's jurisdiction. So
So-
that only applies to private land. That makes sense.
So, yeah, so like this really that only applies to private or state land, maybe? Really?
Possibly state land, maybe city property or county property.
Like if we approve it, I don't think they would have to seek. the
There's no
council.
county
Yeah.
like permits that are needed if it's on federal land.
So I guess we should just talk about how we wanna figure something out so we're on the same page.
Because the law specifically says as part of an application for a permit to the appropriate local jurisdiction, an owner or operator of a utility scale renewable energy facility, and local jurisdiction means county, city, township, things like that.
So 1.5.
Because there's no permit
Okay.
approval needed when you're on federal.
Is it just the footprint of the project, or is it like it's powering Uinta County? But it's way over here, so we have to talk to Uinta County, or just where it is?
I'm not sure about that, if it impacts all like easements and all of the places that feed that. But typically, like if you needed, like you're building a house, you need zoning approval from your city or your county. I don't know about the easement that gets you from the Forest Service.
Yeah, like, so I,
Yeah, I'm not sure
What-
about that piece of it.
we would analyze all that part of it, right? So I guess we could authorize it until the power line got to private or state or something. And then they would need that.
Yes, because that's where the extent of your jurisdiction ends, right?
Yeah. Yeah, as long as like,
It's a connected action.
as long as like you guys are considering a
Would
connected
analyze
action, I
connected
guess.
action.
But for this specific, I guess I don't get that question. Because if they have to go to the local jurisdiction, then this letter has to be included.
Don't know if it connects from power line going to you in the county was your main question on that last one. Lee.
Well, so we would consider that connected.
Right.
And I don't know if, I guess my
That's right.
question was, is
Whether it's
you all,
connected.
yeah, does the county? Because if that was the case, they could get the permitting like right up to the line and then get hung up, I think. Let's just talk more.
Any other questions from the RAC? Questions from the public? Okay, we didn't have any public comments on this one. So we will go ahead, there are no public comment cards. So we'll go ahead and move to the RAC discussion or any kind of motion. Well, no one can do a motion, but discussion. We can state a motion, we just can't vote on it.
I think we should consider like setting up some kind of a call or a meeting or something and kind of hammering that out just so we don't run into snags later on.
I think the biggest takeaway from this one would be you guys would like to see that you guys, they work with the land management agency a little bit more on this one as well, to just so we're both on working together more, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, we don't want to put you in a pickle or anything, and yeah, just probably just needs to be a little bit of coordination when this is involved.
Sounds like to me that honestly, that if they're doing through the NEPA process and they go to the county, that maybe even through the NEPA, that you have an offset mitigation, it can work together, because then they can say, well, I've already doing this with the BLM when they do come to the division, and it can work for the same, serve the same purpose. basically.
I think that would be the best way for it to function. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean, it's opportunity to collaborate.
Even analyses maybe, so you're not double analyzing something, like making extra work.
Any other discussion on this one? Okay, we will go ahead and move on. We have Craig online, Craig Walker with the White Sturgeon introduction. Thanks for hanging in there, Craig. Appreciate you, man.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yep, gotcha.
Sorry, I can't be there in person. Just to give you a quick recap of the presentation that y'all had an opportunity to view. That presentation outlined the proposed introduction of white sturgeon into Grantsville Reservoir in Tooele County and Hobbs Reservoir in Davis County. We're seeking board approval for a catch and release regulation for white sturgeon in both of those waters. That proposed introduction, for those of you that got a chance to view my informational last year, is part of a broader effort that the aquatic section is undertaking to increase angler opportunities statewide.
Any questions from the RAC?
Have you seen, like, are there other areas where they've introduced and have they seen negative impacts from introducing white sturgeon?
It was definitely a consideration that we went through. We have 3 fish recovery programs in the state: the Upper Colorado River Recovery Program, the Virgin River Recovery Program, and then the June Sucker Recovery Program on Utah Lake. Those were the concerns that we had as far as potential impact to recovery species. So that kind of leaves quite a bit of the landscape off the table as far as the introduction of these fish. The potential impact was our primary concern, which is why we chose these 2 waters to mitigate escapement, prevent escapement. As far as potential impacts out there, if they do get into a larger river system where we had recovery species, there is a potential for them to have impact. And that is definitely our major concern in the state.
Thank you.
How big are the fish going to be when you introduce them?
We're stocking them at 6 to 12 inches. And we anticipate, based upon what's in the literature, again, this is an experiment for us. We anticipate them getting probably to be 18 inches within the first couple of years. So comparable to a large trout in the systems that we're stocking them.
Where were they coming from again?
There's a grower in southern Utah that raises this and other species for use in private aquaculture situations, private ponds. So they are graciously working with Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife to provide us with these fish and help us create some diversity in these 2 fisheries.
What's the maximum expected size in these 2 water bodies?
That's what we're looking to see what we can do. I honestly don't know. Fish grow to whatever system they're in. This species is anadromous, migrating from a marine environment to a freshwater environment where it's native. And in those systems, it can achieve sizes of, 18 to 20 feet over a 100-year lifespan. They don't reach sexual maturity until 25. And after they hit kind of that 18-inch to 20-inch mark, they start to slow down in growth and probably only put on, even in the best cases, 2 to 4 inches a year. So we don't anticipate them being huge, but again, something comparable to a large trout that would really be intriguing to, say, a young angler to latch into.
Do you anticipate them being able to reproduce in these water bodies?
It'd take us 25 years to find out. They don't reach sexual maturity until the age 25. So I don't anticipate that being an issue. If it is, it'll be somebody else's problem. No, I'm kidding, completely kidding. No, that's why we want to monitor them. That's why we want to be able to keep our finger on the pulse with this species. And that's why we're not allowing the harvest of this species, because we want to see what they can do. It'd be great if they could persist until that point so we could actually assess whether or not that was a possibility in Utah.
Do you anticipate doing reintroductions? I mean, like putting some in the reservoirs every year kind of thing? Is that feasible? Like maybe doing sterile white sturgeon, it would be a better way to address this opportunity rather than introducing another species, non-native species that you don't know the impacts of.
Sorry, I missed the question there.
Are you going to be doing introductions of this species into the reservoirs several, like every year? Be putting
So no, our
into the water?
Our assessment right now is based on the 50 fish that we're putting in each of these water bodies. Again, catch and release only, and wanting to see what those 50 fish do through time. If after 5 years we start to see them do well, it provides us with a data point that gives us a tool in our toolbox to use in, say, other waters like community waters, smaller fringe waters, what we term them, like a Grantsville reservoir, where we can manage with them safely, mitigate escapement, but potentially have them be a diverse component for the fishery. But right now for these two, we're going to stick with our 50 fish and watch how those do.
Do they do good in low water conditions like drought years or something?
You know, in the literature, they do have a moderate thermal tolerance, which is probably the biggest concern for them. As far as low water goes, we're gonna hope that they persist, because we're gonna be looking for all sorts of tools moving forward to at least maintain fishing opportunities in low water situations across the state. If they do persist in these two waters as part of this examination experiment, again, it provides us with a way to manage in water bodies that are experiencing drastic drawdowns and issues with potential water quality.
Are there any native mussels in those water bodies?
That was a consideration that we put forward, and what we asked our regional biologists when we asked them to put up waters where we could potentially introduce this fish. To our knowledge, no.
Do they eat zebra quagga mussels?
You know, they probably would, but I definitely don't think we want to put them in Lake Powell. That would be a system where they might take off and do bad things for the upper Colorado.
Do we have a study reservoir anywhere, like the upper Okanagan or something like that, where we're kind of in these, in any pond, large, I mean, medium-sized reservoirs, where we're kind of something that we can compare it to?
I wouldn't consider Grantsville or Hobbs to be medium-sized. I would consider them to be, again, small reservoirs, small impoundments. And I don't think that this has been a species that has been introduced to small impoundments by management agencies out there. Again, it's being used by private pond owners currently. The data points that we could probably tap into would be coming from the private pond environment where these fish have been introduced to kind of get a feel for, because that's been happening for, I think, 3 years now, to get a feel for what these fish can possibly do. But as far as public managed waters elsewhere in the West, I'm not certain that there are ones of this size that are being stocked with sturgeon.
So you mentioned in your presentation you would use them as a fisheries or a management tool. I don't know if it was for water quality or fisheries management, but it was really vague, and I was just wondering if you could give some specific examples.
Sure. So you guys are all experiencing what everyone else in Utah is experiencing. It was mentioned at the outset of the meeting. We have low water situations. We have situations where we have harmful algal blooms taking place on the Diamond Mountain Lakes, which is insane to me. We have Flaming Gorge being drawn down to a good bit, and Lake Powell just barely hanging on. We've got temperature issues that restrict our use of trout specifically across the state, cold water species across the state. We're looking at a wide array of species, all comers, except for those that are extremely nasty invasives, which are on our prohibited species list, as potential tools for management in conditions that are unsuitable to some of the species that we currently manage with. That's why this potentially could be a management tool. It was not one that was on our radar specifically. Again, this was an opportunity that was presented to us, and we figured we'd test it out, not to look a gift horse, right? But ideally, we'd like to begin managing with species like sauger, sawguy, to be able to offer up walleye-like opportunities in some of our rivers in the state, where we can, again, do that safely. Sawguy would be a sterile species. But we are in a predicament where, we're challenged with coming up with a need to maintain angling opportunities when we have changing water conditions that we haven't seen in the state historically. We're up for the challenge. We're willing to explore. We're not going to jeopardize our native species when doing so, but we don't believe that managing with native species alongside of what we would consider to be non-natives, sport species, we don't feel that those two things are mutually exclusive at this point in time.
Do you know the private ponds that they're in, are they just in there because they're kind of cool, or were they introduced as a management tool or something?
Private pond owners have a different perspective, right? We manage for 400,000 anglers, and we manage alongside of species of greatest conservation need. We manage alongside of recovery species. Our concerns are broad. Our ability to manage with fish, or that's not something we take lightly. Private pond owners, it can be more whimsical. I think it can be something that they just think is a novelty. But at the same time, I think a lot of private pond owners are hopeful that this species can do some of the things that, they are thinking that species can do, produce caviar, to grow to large sizes, those types of things. I mean, it's cool to dream. As a fish biologist, I would whisper in their ear and say the likelihood of that is pretty slim. But yeah, I mean, that's when you're a private pond owner, again, you get your permit, we review that permit, we make sure that those fish are stocked in a safe way to mitigate escapement and prevent damage to the rest of the resource. But after that, it's a hobby, right?
So do you worry about, because the white sturgeon, they look pretty cool in those reservoirs. I mean, it happens all over the, it happens all over the state where they'll take the fish and move them, the public. So then you've got a statement right there already. Is that a concern?
It's always a concern. We're currently working on an illegal movement response plan that should be presented to your group, hopefully during this next RAC cycle. We're trying to get all of the bows put on that. If not, it'll be the following RAC cycle. But yeah, we need to address that issue on a variety of fronts from an enforcement standpoint. But the primary way to address it is a lot like invasive species, because we do consider any of these, when they're illegally moved, to be potential invasive species, when they're not a sanctioned introduction like we undertake for a wide array of species. And the best tool that we have, as has been proven, is education. So our hope is that we begin to educate a public about the fact that we can provide things to them, a diverse array of opportunities, but they've got to cooperate with us, and they've got to let us do the things that we can do as fisheries professionals. Tell us what you want, and we'll see what we can do in a safe manner. If that's going to take an adult education module, which is probably going to be suggested, so be it. Very similar to what we have right now for quagga.
I know, so I work as an engineer, and then sometimes I know one of these reservoirs we've looked at in the past that they were looking at upgrading, fixing. These are going to be drained anytime soon.
So are Grantsville and Hobbs going to be drained anytime soon for repair purposes? To my knowledge, no.
One concern, I mean, I guess one concern I have about, I've caught a lot of sturgeon, and the way I know best is put something stinky, something with a lot of scent on the bottom of the water body, and then they come and vacuum it up. Having a catch and release sturgeon is great when they're big, but I guess an 18 to 20 inch sturgeon in a year from now, and if it takes a worm off the bottom, could easily find itself down the esophagus. And if we only have 50 of them, the mortality of the method of catch seems like it'd be quite high. But that's just
It's again, it's going to get to an education component similar to what we put forward for tiger muskie at a place like Newton Reservoir years ago, where people were out there, fishing from shore with everything from chicken wings to chicken livers to whatever it was for tiger muskie. And Muskies Inc., who is one of our partners in the tiger muskie management effort, was very concerned about the potential for catch and release mortality, quote unquote, catch and release mortality with deep hooked fish. And we put forward an education campaign that did mitigate that to a large degree, asking people to cut the line as close to the mouth as possible, understanding that the hooks they'd be fishing with would be rusting out in short order. And I think that as long as individuals are doing that and not trying to degouge the hook from the throat of a fish with some tool that's sold to them on the open market, I think that the fish will do fine. When you start seeing people try to get the hooks out and become surgeons in their own right, that's where the fish really struggle.
What kind of data are you planning on collecting? Like if this works out and it's awesome and they don't escape, and you want to put them other places, like are you gonna analyze what they're eating at all, growth rates?
So we'll be conducting our typical reservoir surveys and assessing the fish that we catch for growth primarily. But what we'd also be doing is putting something out on the street. We're working on a variety of self-reporting tools right now for anglers so that they could actually provide us with data points related to their interaction with this fish, whether they're actually catching them, what they're catching them on, whether or not they're releasing them successfully, which was a concern of ours early. At the end of the day, they are probably the best sampling tool we have as far as a population of fish that, for all intents and purposes, even in these small water bodies, is fairly small in and of itself. 50 fish is not many fish. So us going out and performing traditional sampling methods, as a snapshot is probably not going to allow us to interact with many individuals out there. The data points are going to be probably coming from anglers via this self-reporting effort.
Any other RAC questions? Any questions from the public? Okay, we didn't have any electronic comments on this one, and no public comment cards. So is there any comments from the RAC?
I think if you could, it would be awesome to see what they're eating.
Yeah, I mean, we do lavage with walleye when we don't want to kill larger walleye. So that's a potential for us to go in and assess what they've got in their diet without it being lethal, for sure.
I appreciate looking at opportunities for anglers and fishermen. But I also think that we're kind of in a new paradigm because of drought and projected lack of water. Bringing in non-native species is maybe not as responsible as it once was. And just looking back in the 80s when they were in the brook trout, and now we're spending millions trying to get them out of mountain streams. It's just, as a, land manager, we spend a lot of money trying to restore habitat and, try to remove non-native species. And so it's kind of, for me, I don't know if I really agree with it. So.
Yeah, I think it could probably be really bad if they got into the river systems, just their feeding method and, spawning native fish that we're trying to recover. I know you're doing everything you can to mitigate for that, but well, seen Jurassic Park, right?
Slurping up eggs.
I have faith in Craig, and fisheries biologists that have looked into this. I think it's a good thing. I think they've evaluated these things of the fish, and that's why they picked the reservoirs they did. So I think it's a great thing. I think, like I say, I have a lot of faith in, Craig and the biologist with it. I think they evaluated all that. So I
And
appreciate
just,
it.
thank you. Just to, I know I'm not going to completely alleviate the land management concerns, but our primary purpose right now is to make sure that we don't lose any species on our watch. We've recently put forward efforts to take the woundfin and bring them into a captive environment to get them back out on the landscape, rearing thousands of those fish. And, we're looking forward to taking our hatchery capacity that we've been able to build up recently and pivot a lot of that away from sport species and into the native fish realm. So that we can begin augmenting these populations as well, which I think has been a deficiency historically from a management standpoint, really starting to manage some of our native fishes rather than just let them do what they do. As one of my friends said back in the day, it feels sometimes like we're just monitoring the decline of some of these species, and that's not what we want to do. So we are really cognizant of that, and it is something that we'll be moving forward with in the future. You all will see something coming up here in the September RAC, assuming that we do get a decent amount of public support for it. And that is what I'm going to term the sportification of our native species. So we begin to get the general public, the general angling public, begin to give them an appreciation for these other, what have been termed historically as trash or rough fish, and start viewing them as a critical component and a fishing opportunity in Utah. I think that gives us the ability to get the support from our angling public to protect those species, but also the systems that they live in. So again, this is not something we take lightly. This is not something that we haven't thought about, and we will be making moves on the other side of the coin from the native fish standpoint to shore up those gaps as well.
I think I've got a sturgeon before. They're really cool. Be quite experienced for a 12-year-old boy to catch a 3-foot fish.
You can go up to Idaho.
Have you considered pit tagging them in case one did get out, we could pick it up somewhere?
That's a great question. And no, we hadn't. I think that's a great suggestion. It'd be really simple for us to put pit tags into these fish. The issue we've got, though, is that they're fairly recognizable and there's only 50 of them. So if somebody were to find them, it's not like they came from somewhere else in all likelihood. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
It could be like an early warning system or something if it pings, somewhere in the river, right?
Right.
Any other RAC comments, discussion? Okay, appreciate it, Craig.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll move on. We have one more regional presentation on the Bear Top WMA, and it looks like Tori put it on the pack.
Pat Rainbold, Habitat Program Manager. Tori Mathis actually did the work on that, but we're gonna have discussion and questions. Hope you had a chance to review his presentation. He did a great job on this, very thorough. And yeah, with that, I'll take any questions or discussion you have on the Bear Top HEP.
Where does it get used up there?
Quite a bit. There's, it is very isolated up on the top there, but we do get that. It is walk-in access only. It's just an administratively accessed road, but we do get a lot of shed hunters up there in the spring. And then you have all kinds of big game hunters up there in the fall. There's sage grouse up there. I think we get the occasional bird watcher up there. So yeah, it's more use than you would think for an isolated property like that.
Is it within one of the sage grouse units you can hunt in?
It's not a huntable unit. It is in an SGMA, but it's not.
What are your main goals for this WMA?
Mainly for the protection of big game habitat. There have a lot of species.
Mule deer, elk, pronghorn, some moose up there, sage grouse. It is landlocked within the Flaming Gorge NRA managed by the Ashland National Forest, so tied to their management, they kind of have the same management goals up there on that mountain. It's nice and isolated. It's a great place for wildlife. So it's a great property for us to have easily managed, no real issues up there.
So this is a plan that was reviewed, is that?
Yes,
Okay.
we got these properties in 82. And I think the latest HMP for this was in 98 or 99. And so we're a little behind on updating. No
Does
no
this go, do these go through the process then next, or is it just, maybe updated it?
It still goes through the same process. We have the regional review, we take it through the
Okay.
counties, it comes to the RAC, and then if the wildlife ward, if they would want to see this,
Oh,
they usually just want to see new HMPs.
okay.
The ones where
It
we
might be
make.
nice to coordinate with the forest since we're kind of tied together
Mhm.
before you send it through the process. I don't know.
Will do.
If you have suggestions or something.
Oh, sure. It's still in draft status, so we'll do that over. I guess that would be the Ranger District of Manila.
Yeah, I'd cover that
Okay.
as well. Vernal Edge.
Great property. You guys do a good job with it. So been up there before, seen bighorns on it and whatnot and elk, and it's good property. Like I say, not many people, there may not be a ton of people see it, but it does get used to it. Any other discussion on it? Oh, thanks.
Thanks.
Stand
with you.
I guess we don't have, we could probably make a motion to adjourn if we want. So guess we'll adjourn. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Appreciate all the RAC people, all the presentations. Thank you.
Have a great night.